Patrick sat in his sleek midtown office, the city sprawling beneath him in a glittering mosaic of lights and skyscrapers. His surroundings spoke of wealth without restraint. Abstract paintings from acclaimed artists hung on the walls, designer furniture with sharp lines filled the space, and the panoramic view from floor-to-ceiling windows captured the pulse of New York City. He leaned back in his leather chair, catching his own reflection in the glass. His watch glinted under the afternoon sun, a rare, limited edition piece, much like everything else he owned. Yet, for all the luxury around him, his mind was consumed by one thing: the evening he had meticulously planned with Catherine, his lover. He picked up his phone, fingers moving with precision, a cold, calculated smile spreading across his face. "I'll pick you up at 3. Be ready." Within seconds, Catherine replied with a photograph. She was dressed provocatively, exuding confidence and allure, ready for one of the city's most prestigious business events. Downstairs, Georgia moved quietly through the kitchen of their Upper West Side townhouse, her hands moving deftly as she prepared dinner. The soft clatter of silverware against plates contrasted sharply with the heavy silence that had settled over the house like a fog. She knew Patrick wouldn't be joining her tonight. He never did. There were always excuses: meetings, events, or high-profile galas she was never invited to. Truthfully, she didn't want to go. Every time her eyes lingered on the empty chair at the dining table, she felt the weight of a life beside a man who had never truly seen her. Patrick's voice suddenly cut through the stillness from upstairs. "I'm leaving. Don't wait up." Georgia looked up calmly, watching him descend the stairs in his immaculate tailored suit, barely glancing at her, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. Silence had become routine between them, a language they both understood without words. Why speak? Any attempt at conversation always ended with curt, cold replies. "You traveling?" she asked, not out of curiosity but out of polite habit. "Business. I need to close an important deal overseas," he replied, rifling through his wallet with casual precision. She knew exactly what that meant. Business, a code for the days he vanished without explanation. She had never asked questions. He had made it clear she didn't belong in his world. "You're not cut out for it," he often reminded her. "You'll never understand how things work. I handle everything. Have a good trip," she said with serene composure, a calm that seemed to irritate him. Patrick paused, squinting at her as if her composure puzzled him. He stepped closer, stopping just in front of her. "Couldn't you try a little harder?" he sneered. "No wonder people wonder why I'm still with you." Georgia lowered her gaze but didn't falter. She had heard it all before. His disdain was palpable. He saw her as simple, lacking the glamour he so prized. Yet her calm, unshakable calm was something Patrick could never comprehend. "I do my best, Patrick. Maybe it's not enough for you, but it's enough for me." He laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "That's the problem, Georgia. Your best is never enough." With that, he grabbed his car keys and left without another word. The door closed, and the townhouse sank into its familiar silence. Georgia lingered for a moment, feeling the emptiness wrap around her like a heavy blanket. Once it would have wounded her deeply, but now it was simply another night. Meanwhile, Patrick was already navigating the streets of Manhattan, driving toward Catherine's apartment. His pulse quickened, not with nerves, but with the thrill of anticipation. Unlike Georgia, Catherine made him feel alive, like a predator in his domain. She was young, beautiful, confident, the perfect complement to the world he thought he commanded. He had no inkling that the life he believed he controlled was on the brink of upheaval. Back in the townhouse, Georgia stayed in the kitchen, listening to the fading echo of his footsteps. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to the silence, a quiet companion that had replaced the old pain. Every corner of the home held memories of subtle, stinging humiliations endured in the name of love. Her eyes fell on her wedding ring, once a sacred symbol, now just another decoration for Patrick. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Mr. Franklin, a man of unwavering strength and quiet dignity. From him, she had inherited something more valuable than wealth: the ability to hold her head high even when the world seemed intent on breaking her. She remembered the day she had told him she was marrying Patrick. "Are you sure, my daughter?" Mr. Franklin had asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern she hadn't noticed at the time. Ambition can be a double-edged sword. I love him, Dad. That's all I need, she had replied, brimming with hope. He will love me for who I am. Her father's silence that day spoke volumes. He had known she was stepping into a world that might not deserve her, yet he respected her choice. Now, years later, Georgia understood that Patrick's love had always been conditional, never enough for him. Yet she had no regrets. She saw life not in terms of regret, but in lessons learned. As she cleared the table, a memory resurfaced, the first gala where she felt invisible next to Patrick. She had chosen a simple yet elegant dress, valuing substance over flash. But at the event, the room's elite stared, women adorned in sparkling jewelry, men in sharp suits, and Patrick beside her, embarrassed and impatient. You could have tried harder, he had whispered, squeezing her arm. I'm comfortable like this, Patrick, she had replied with calm certainty. He had never been comfortable with her simplicity. At every gathering, he presented her to the world with a cold detachment, expecting someone dazzling, someone who reflected the shine he craved. Returning home that night, her father's words echoed in her mind. Ambition is a double-edged sword. Alone in the kitchen, Georgia exhaled, embracing the quiet strength she had cultivated over the years. Invisible to Patrick, she had always held value to herself, and that was what truly mattered. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. Always remember who you are, my daughter. The strength inside you is far greater than any appearance. She smiled, feeling seen by the one person who had always understood. That strength had carried her through darkness, keeping her steady even as her world seemed to crumble. She gazed out at the city lights twinkling in the distance, knowing her worth was never measured by parties, attention, or Patrick's approval. It lived in the quiet confidence she carried, in the dignity she had maintained. No amount of money or power could make Patrick understand that, but she did. And that, ultimately, was what kept her standing. Meanwhile, Patrick strode into the Langham Hotel, New York City, Catherine at his side. Their confidence filled the grand lobby, he with his usual air of superiority, believing he controlled every room he entered, she, radiant in a head-turning dress, every bit the accomplice to his self-assuredness. Patrick straightened his suit, convinced this evening's business engagement would cement his dominance. Catherine squeezed his arm, her voice soft yet deliberate. Are you sure everything's ready, darling? She asked. All under control, he replied smoothly, a smug smile curling his lips. Mr. Franklin will cave. It's only a matter of time. The conference room doors swung open, and a hush of expectation rolled through the polished space. Patrick stepped forward, ready to greet Mr. Franklin, the wealthy magnate he believed he was about to manipulate. But the scene that met his eyes froze him in place, his heart thudding against his chest. Standing there was not just Mr. Franklin, but Georgia, his wife, and she was no longer the subdued, deferential woman he had silently dismissed for years. She stood tall beside her father, shoulders squared, eyes bright and unwavering, radiating a confidence that made the air around her seem charged. This was not the accessory Patrick had long assumed she was. This was a force in her own right. Mr. Franklin's voice cut through the silence, deep and authoritative. We weren't expecting company. His sharp gaze shifted to Catherine, who immediately shrank back, the tension in the room thick enough to taste. Patrick's practiced smile faltered. Mr. Franklin, this is Catherine. She is not on the invitation, Mr. Franklin said, his tone crisp, precise. This is a family meeting, and you brought an intruder. Patrick felt the floor tilt beneath him. The room he had always believed he commanded now seemed to swallow him whole. George's calm, controlled voice pierced the heavy air. You thought it would be convenient to embarrass us, she said, her gaze locked on Patrick's, cold but composed. You thought you could act like nothing mattered, like I was invisible? Catherine glanced at Patrick, silently asking for guidance, but he was paralyzed. Georgia continued, her eyes never leaving his. For years, you treated me like a prop on a stage. Today, you'll understand the game has changed. The tension was nearly tangible. Mr. Franklin remained perfectly still, his approving gaze fixed on his daughter. Patrick felt sweat trickle down his back. How had the situation flipped so completely? How had the woman he had dismissed become an unstoppable force? Georgia stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You think power is about shouting louder or having more money? Real power, she said, her voice soft yet carrying an intensity that made Patrick swallow hard, is knowing who you are, even when the world tries to tear you down. Georgia. I don't understand, he muttered, voice trembling. You didn't understand because you never paid attention, she said, her lips curving into a smile that held no warmth, only triumph. Today, you'll witness the woman you underestimated, the woman you humiliated, take control. Unlike you, I never needed to step on anyone to feel strong. Catherine recoiled slightly. Maybe we should leave, Patrick, she whispered. George's eyes never wavered. Patrick needs to stay. He needs to understand that the world he thinks he controls is crumbling, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Mr. Franklin, silent until now, gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Georgia had always possessed more power than Patrick had ever imagined. His fatal mistake had been never seeing it. Patrick stood frozen, trying to process the sudden collapse of his carefully constructed world. How was he, the man who had controlled everything around him, now completely at a disadvantage? He exited the conference room slowly, each step weighted with the consequences of his arrogance. Catherine hurried after him, a mixture of confusion and panic on her face. Patrick, what was that? What do we do now? She whispered. But Patrick had no answer. He sank into a plush chair in the hotel lobby, hands trembling as if the years of confidence and dominance had evaporated in minutes. A whisper of George's voice seemed to echo in his memory. It's all her fault. Catherine leaned closer, desperate. She and her father set a trap. Patrick, you have to do something. But for the first time in years, Patrick felt powerless. He had spent his life crafting an image, a narrative of money and dominance, believing it gave him the right to trample anyone, including Georgia. Now, a bitter realization struck him like a punch to the gut. It wasn't her who destroyed me, he murmured, voice low and heavy with remorse. It was me. Catherine recoiled. What are you saying? How? He shook his head slowly. I ruined everything. Georgia didn't trick me. She waited for the right moment. And I gave her every reason to do it. I humiliated her, treated her like nothing, and now I have nothing. Memories of every insult, every dismissive glance, every cruel word rose like a tide, suffocating him. Catherine watched, stunned, as she realized this battle was already lost. Can't we just start over? Patrick asked, desperation creeping into his tone. He laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter laugh. You don't understand. This isn't a game we can restart. Everything I believed mattered. Money, appearances, power, none of it matters now. Not to Georgia. Not to Mr. Franklin. And certainly not to me. Across the lobby, Georgia appeared, every step deliberate, her presence commanding even from a distance. Her eyes met his, not with anger, but with indifference, a truth more piercing than hatred. Georgia, Patrick said, rising unsteadily from the chair, desperation etched into his features. I was wrong. She regarded him with a cold, unwavering gaze. You always thought you could fix everything with an apology. But this isn't about apologies, Patrick. It's about the choices you made. He tried to speak again, but words failed him. Georgia stepped closer, standing directly in front of him. You made your choices, Patrick, she said. And now you live with them. There's nothing I can do to change that, and honestly, I wouldn't want to. Her words cut deeper than any accusation could. Catherine shifted uneasily, sensing the complete reversal of power in the room. The opulent hotel, the deals, the image of success Patrick had flaunted, it all seemed hollow now. He, the man who had always showcased dominance, was utterly alone. No, Georgia, Patrick began. There's nothing left to say, she interrupted, voice firm and final. I've borne this pain in silence for years. Now it's your turn. Me. You. That's the reality. I've moved forward, Patrick, and believe me, it's the best decision I've ever made. Without another word, She turned and walked toward the exit. Each step made her figure smaller, but her presence lingered, overwhelming, leaving Patrick to confront the emptiness his own choices had created. Later, Georgia sat on the terrace of her family's Upper West Side townhouse, the place where she had spent her childhood summers, climbing the old iron railing and listening to the distant hum of the city below. The familiar brick walls and wrought iron furniture had always felt like a refuge, a small sanctuary from a world she was only beginning to understand. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, the late afternoon breeze teasing strands of her loose, dark hair across her face. It was strange to be back, to return to her roots, yet she felt like a completely different woman from the one who had left years ago. Her eyes scanned the horizon, but her mind replayed the tumultuous weeks that had led her here. "Patrick is waiting in the living room," her sister Samantha said, stepping onto the terrace. Concern was etched across her face, soft worry lines deepened by the quiet tension she sensed. Georgia simply nodded, a calm certainty settling over her. The moment she had anticipated, had prepared for mentally countless times, was finally here. She rose with composed grace and walked into the house. The living room was bathed in warm golden light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Patrick stood near the window, the Manhattan skyline stretching behind him, a figure of distance and unease. His tailored suit seemed almost out of place against the softness of the light, his posture stiff. When he noticed Georgia, he turned slowly, as if the motion itself required courage. Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice weighted by all the guilt he had carried. Georgia studied him silently, letting the seconds stretch between them. "You wanted to talk? Then speak," she said, her tone calm but edged with steel. He drew in a deep, trembling breath, gathering what little courage he had. "I know I've made so many mistakes I've lost count. I'm not here to erase the past. I know that's impossible. But I need you to know that I'm trying to change, Georgia. At least, I'm trying." Her face remained serene, but her eyes betrayed the shadows of old pain, a pain that had healed, leaving behind only faint, unyielding marks. "And what do you want with this, Patrick? For me to say everything will be okay? That we can go back to what we were?" He looked down, avoiding her eyes, acknowledging the question without needing words. "I just want you to know. I'm sorry. I see now what I did to our life." "Sorry," Georgia echoed, a bitter undertone in her voice. "Do you know how many nights I waited to hear those words? Nights I went to bed alone while you were with another woman. The times I was humiliated in public, forced to smile, pretending everything was fine." Patrick lowered his head, guilt pressing down like a physical weight. "I know I have no excuses. I was blind, selfish. But now I see. I realize how strong you've been, stronger than I ever imagined." Georgia stepped closer, yet maintained the distance that years of betrayal had built between them. "I always knew, Patrick. I always knew about your betrayals. I knew when you went to see Catherine, or anyone else. But I chose not to act, not because I was weak, but because I understood something you never did. You were destroying yourself, and I just had to wait." Tears welled in his eyes, but he said nothing, understanding the finality in her words. "You lost me, didn't you?" she breathed, the room quiet except for the soft sigh of wind brushing the windows. "You never truly had me. You were always focused on what people thought, on the image of a successful man. And me? I was here by my own choice, not for you, but to prove to myself that I was more than what you valued." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the muted sounds of the city outside. Patrick finally spoke, voice small and tentative. "And now, what happens?" Georgia met his gaze with a mixture of compassion and unshakable resolve. "I move forward, Patrick. Not for you, but for me. I rebuilt myself while you tore yourself apart. I'm stronger because of it. There's no hatred, no resentment, just the certainty that I don't need you to define who I am. Just one more chance," he said, almost pleading, "to make things right." She shook her head, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "The last chance was when you let me go. Every time I begged for respect. Now it's too late for the two of us. You have your path, Patrick, and I have mine." At that moment, Mr. Franklin entered the room, her father, who had always waited in the shadows for the right moment to step in. He placed a gentle, reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you, daughter. You found your voice, your strength." Patrick turned toward Mr. Franklin, expecting reproach or anger, but the older man simply nodded, his expression measured, quietly acknowledging that it was too late for anything else. Patrick was left to face the full consequences of his choices, far from the family circle he had long underestimated. With one final lingering glance, Georgia turned and walked toward the terrace. Her silhouette grew smaller with each step, yet her presence remained commanding, filling the room with an unspoken power. Patrick sank into the nearest chair, the weight of his failures pressing down like an anchor. As Mr. Franklin followed his daughter out, Patrick was left alone with his thoughts, the truth hitting him like a cold winter wind. True success, he realized, was not measured in appearances, wealth, or influence. It was in the connections he had destroyed, in the love he had betrayed. And now, the path to redemption stretched ahead, solitary and uncertain, without Georgia by his side. You just heard this one from Stories by Sue. If it resonated, don't forget to like and subscribe. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching.